The first time I heard Derek speaking Korean on the phone, my blood turned to ice. Not because I had any problem with the language, but because 6 months earlier, when we'd first moved into the rental house on Maple Street in Seattle, Derek had introduced himself as my new neighbor, with such enthusiasm that I hadn't gotten the chance to mention I was fluent in Korean. My grandmother had emigrated from Seoul, and I'd grown up speaking both languages at home. Derek didn't know this. And on that ordinary Thursday afternoon, standing in my kitchen pretending to wash dishes while he took a call in my hallway, I heard him reveal a plan so sinister, so calculated, that my hands started shaking so badly I nearly dropped the glass I was holding. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back 6 months, to the day we arrived at our new home. My name is Jessica Martinez, and I'm a single mother to 2 incredible kids. Emma is 10 years old, sharp as a tack, with her father's dark eyes and my stubborn streak. Her younger brother Liam just turned 7, all energy and endless questions about how everything works. Their father, my ex-husband, walked out when Liam was 2, just packed a bag one Tuesday morning and never came back. No explanation, no forwarding address, just child support payments that arrived like clockwork every month, as if money could fill the void he'd left in our children's lives. Moving to Seattle was supposed to be a fresh start. My company had offered me a promotion with a significant raise, enough that I could afford a 3-bedroom house in a decent school district. The neighborhood was perfect. Tree-lined streets where kids still played outside until the streetlights came on. A park 3 blocks away with a playground that hadn't been vandalized. Neighbors who actually knew each other's names. After years of struggling in a cramped apartment in Phoenix, this felt like we'd finally made it. Make it high, goodbye. The moving truck had barely pulled away when Derek appeared on our front porch. He was in his early 40s, fit in that way that suggested he spent serious time at the gym, with sandy blonde hair and the kind of smile that immediately made you feel like you'd known him for years. He carried a casserole dish wrapped in a checkered towel and wore a worn university sweatshirt that gave him an approachable, friendly neighbor vibe. "Welcome to the neighborhood," he said, his voice warm and enthusiastic. "I'm Derek Chen. I live 2 houses down, the blue one with the terrible lawn." He laughed self-deprecatingly. "I'm convinced grass just hates me personally." The kids were immediately drawn to him. Derek crouched down to their level, asking Emma about the Harry Potter book she was clutching and complimenting Liam on his superhero t-shirt. Within 5 minutes, he had them laughing, and I felt that desperate single-parent gratitude when another adult shows genuine interest in your children. "I noticed you've got kids," he continued, standing back up to address me. "This is a great neighborhood for families. My place is always open if you need anything. And I mean anything. Last-minute babysitting, borrowing tools, whatever." His offer seemed genuinely kind. In that moment, standing in my new front yard surrounded by unpacked boxes, exhausted from the move, and terrified about starting a new job the following week, Derek felt like an answer to a prayer I hadn't even finished saying. Over the next few weeks, Derek became a fixture in our lives. He'd appear just when I needed an extra hand carrying groceries from the car. He'd offer to watch the kids for an hour when I realized I'd forgotten to buy milk. Small favors that made single parenthood in a new city slightly less overwhelming. Emma and Liam adored him. He'd play soccer with Liam in the backyard, teach Emma card tricks, and tell terrible jokes that had them both in stitches. He was energetic, attentive, and filled a void I hadn't fully realized existed. The first time I asked him to babysit was about 2 months in. I had a mandatory evening work function that I couldn't skip, and my usual emergency contacts, my mom and my sister Claire, were both in Phoenix, too far away to help. Derek immediately agreed when I called him, even joking, that he'd make it a movie night with popcorn and ice cream. When I came home 3 hours later, the kids were in their pajamas, teeth brushed, and practically bouncing with excitement to tell me about the fun they'd had. Derek had cleaned up the kitchen and even folded the throw blankets on the couch. "They're great kids," he told me at the door, his voice soft with what seemed like genuine affection. "Seriously, Jessica, call me anytime. It's no trouble at all." After that, Derek became my go-to babysitter. Once a week, sometimes twice, He'd come over while I worked late or attended parent teacher conferences or ran errands that were impossible with two kids in tow. It was convenient. More than that, it was a relief. The kids loved him, he was reliable, and he never asked for payment, waving away my attempts to compensate him for his time. Looking back, I can see exactly when the red flags started appearing. But at the time, I was so grateful for the help, so exhausted from juggling work and parenting alone, that I rationalized everything away. It started with small comments. Emma should really be getting more sleep. Derek mentioned one evening when I picked the kids up from his house. Growing kids need 10 hours a night, and I've noticed she seems tired lately. I was taken aback. Emma's bedtime was 8:30, which seemed reasonable for a 10-year-old. But Derek said it so confidently, with such apparent concern, that I wondered if I was wrong. Then came suggestions about Liam's diet. Too much sugar can affect concentration and behavior, Derek told me, his tone educational rather than critical. I've been reading about childhood nutrition. If you want, I can share some articles with you. The suggestions kept coming. Emma should be in more challenging classes. Liam needed more structure in his after-school activities. I should limit their screen time more strictly. Each suggestion was delivered with a smile, framed as helpful advice from someone who cared about my kids. But there was an underlying message I didn't want to acknowledge. I wasn't doing enough. I wasn't doing it right. When I finally pushed back gently one evening, Derek's response should have been my wake-up call. "I'm sorry," he said, and his eyes actually welled up with what looked like genuine emotion. "I know I'm overstepping. It's just that I've always wanted kids, you know? But I found out a few years ago that I'm infertile." He paused, and the pain in his voice seemed so real. "I guess I see Emma and Liam almost like they're mine. I know that's crazy. They're your kids. But if you'd experienced what I have, the doctors telling you that you'll never be a father, you'd understand why I get so invested." His story hit me right in the heart. I immediately felt guilty for being defensive. Here was a man dealing with his own grief and loss, finding some comfort in helping my children, and I was making it about my ego. "I appreciate everything you do for us," I told him sincerely. "The kids are lucky to have you in their lives." He smiled, seemingly reassured, and I thought that was the end of it. But what I didn't know was that this was exactly the response Derek had been manipulating me toward a con. Guilt, sympathy, permission to deepen his involvement in our lives. The shift in the kids' attitudes started so subtly that I almost missed it. Emma would mention casually that Derek let them stay up later when he babysat. "He says bedtime is more of a suggestion than a rule," she explained matter-of-factly. Liam added that Derek let them have dessert before dinner. "He says life is too short to follow every rule all the time." These comments seemed innocent, even charming in a fun uncle sort of way. But there was an undertone I couldn't quite identify. A gentle undermining of my authority dressed up as laid-back parenting. Then the comments became more direct. "Derek says he'd be a better parent than you are," Emma told me one morning while I was rushing to get them ready for school. She said it so casually while pouring cereal that it took a moment for the words to register. My hand froze on the milk carton. "What did you say?" Emma looked up, seemingly oblivious to the bombshell she'd just dropped. "Derek said he'd make a better parent. Because he has more time and energy. He's not always stressed like you are." My heart started pounding. "Emma, that's not an appropriate thing for an adult to say to a child." She shrugged, suddenly defensive. "He's just being honest. You're always tired and grumpy. Derek is fun." Liam nodded in agreement, and I felt something crack inside my chest. My own children, comparing me unfavorably to a neighbor. But when I tried to address it, to explain that Derek was crossing boundaries, both kids became hostile. The conversation ended with Emma storming to her room and Liam declaring that I was just jealous because they loved Derek more than me. Over the next few weeks, the comments escalated. "Derek told us to listen to him instead of you. Derek says you don't understand what we need. Derek wants to be our dad, but you won't let him. That last comment, delivered by 7-year-old Liam with complete sincerity, made me feel physically ill. I wanted to confront Derek immediately, to march over to his house and demand he stop poisoning my children against me. But I was terrified. The kids clearly loved him, and if I came across as the bad guy, trying to keep them apart, I'd only push them further away. I started researching parental alienation and manipulation tactics late at night, after the kids were asleep. Everything I read described Derek's behavior with unsettling accuracy. The idealization of himself as the perfect parent figure. The subtle and then overt criticism of me. The creation of special secrets and bonds with the children that excluded me. The undermining of my rules and authority. This wasn't a well-meaning friend overstepping boundaries. This was systematic manipulation designed to separate children from their parent. The question that haunted me was why? Why would Derek invest so much time and energy into turning my children against me? What was his endgame? The answer came on an ordinary Thursday afternoon, 6 months after we'd moved in. I'd invited Derek over for dinner, intending to have a calm, adult conversation about boundaries. I spent hours preparing his favorite dishes, cleaning the house until it sparkled, setting the scene for a peaceful discussion. I never planned to tell Emma and Liam that Derek was coming, but they overheard me talking to Claire on the phone about it while they were supposed to be asleep. The next morning, they were vibrating with excitement. "Is Derek really coming tonight?" Emma asked for the 10th time. "Can we show him our new room decorations? Can he stay late?" Liam kept touching my arm anxiously. "Mommy, please don't be mean to Derek. Please don't make him angry at us." The fear in his voice broke something in me. My 7-year-old son was afraid I would damage his relationship with a grown man who was supposed to be our neighbor, and nothing more. When Derek arrived that evening, both kids launched themselves at him before I could even finish opening the door. He knelt down, spending long minutes making silly faces and listening to their chatter about school and friends and everything happening in their lives. Then he stood up, and our eyes met across the foyer. The energy shift was immediate and unmistakable. The warm, friendly Derek disappeared, replaced by someone cold and calculating. His smile didn't reach his eyes. I invited him to sit at the dinner table for our private conversation, but he declined. "I'd prefer to sit on the couch," he said, his tone pleasant but firm. "So the kids can sit with me. I've missed them." "The conversation I need to have with you isn't appropriate for Emma and Liam to hear," I explained carefully. He smiled, but there was nothing warm about it. "That's nonsense," he said, the word dripping with condescension. "What kind of mother forces her children to their room when a dear friend visits?" He looked at Emma and Liam. "Do you want to stay here with me?" "Yes," they chorused immediately. Emma added, "Uncle Derek's right, we should get to choose." I felt my careful plans crumbling. Every attempt I made to steer the conversation toward boundaries, toward the inappropriate things he'd been saying to the kids, he deflected. He'd ask Emma or Liam a question about their day, make a joke that had them laughing, remind them of a fun time they'd shared. He used my own children as shields, preventing me from saying anything critical because I couldn't be the bad guy in front of them. We ended up watching a cartoon the kids loved, and the entire time, Derek kept flashing me this unsettling smile. A victor's smile, like he'd won a game I hadn't even realized we were playing. Then his phone rang. He stopped running his fingers through Liam's hair and excused himself to the hallway. "I'll just be a minute," he said cheerfully. Through the closed door between the kitchen and hallway, I heard him start speaking, but not in English. He was speaking Korean. Fluent Korean. My heart started racing. He'd lived 2 houses down for 6 months and had multiple opportunities to mention he spoke Korean. But he never had. Why? I stood up casually, walking toward the kitchen sink and filling a glass with water I didn't want. The kids were absorbed in their cartoon, arguing about which character was the funniest. I moved closer to the hallway door, pressing my ear against it. What I heard next made my entire body go numb. Derek was on the phone with someone, his voice dripping with sarcasm and cruel amusement as he spoke in Korean. He was mocking me, talking about how gullible I was, how perfectly his plan was proceeding. Just a few more months before they're mine, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice even through the door. I've already turned them against her completely. Now I just need to create an incident. Hurt one of them in some way that looks like neglect. Frame her for being an unfit mother. Once CPS shows up and investigates, they'll see the pattern I've been building. The kids will tell them how much better I am than her, how much they want to live with me. And guess who they'll want to place the children with? That's right. Me and only me. My knees nearly buckled. I gripped the kitchen counter to stay upright, my vision swimming. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. But Derek kept talking, his voice filled with pride at his own cleverness. Children are so easy to manipulate. You just have to offer them rewards for compliance. Act disappointed when they don't do what you want. Make them feel special and chosen. They'll tell you anything, believe anything. These two were particularly easy. No father in the picture, overwhelmed mother desperate for adult attention. It was almost too simple. I stumbled back to the couch, my face drained of color, my hands clenched into fists to stop them from shaking. My thoughts were racing so fast I felt dizzy. This man, this stranger I'd welcomed into our lives, had been systematically working to steal my children from me. Not through kidnapping or obvious danger, but through something far more insidious. He'd been manipulating Emma and Liam, turning them against me, all while building a case to present to authorities that would paint me as an unfit mother. When Derek returned from the hallway a few minutes later, his charming mask firmly back in place, I forced myself to smile. Because I'd realized something crucial. If I confronted him now, he'd know I spoke Korean. He'd know his plan was exposed, and a cornered predator's a dangerous thing, especially when my children were in the room. So I smiled. I laughed at his jokes. I played the oblivious, grateful single mom he thought I was. And inside, I began planning how to protect my children from a threat more terrifying than I'd ever imagined. That night, after Derek left and Emma and Liam were asleep, I sat in the dark living room trying to process what I'd learned. Every memory of the past 6 months replayed in my mind, but now with a sinister overlay. All those helpful gestures, the eager babysitting, the special attention he gave the kids. None of it was kindness. It was all part of a calculated plan to take my children from me. The manipulation had been so subtle, so expertly executed, that I'd been completely blind to it. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. By the time the sun rose, I'd cycled through shock, terror, and finally, rage. Pure, protective rage that every mother feels when someone threatens her children. I called in sick to work and drove Emma and Liam to school myself, making absolutely certain Derek wasn't anywhere nearby. Then I called my sister Claire, the only person I trusted completely. "He's been doing what?" Claire practically screamed through the phone when I explained everything. "Planning to frame you for neglect, to steal your kids through CPS? Jessica, this is beyond sick. This is criminal." "I need evidence," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "It's my word against his, and he's spent 6 months building his case while I was completely oblivious." Claire, who worked in legal services, immediately understood the problem. "You need to document everything. Record his behavior. Get him to reveal his intentions on tape. Without solid proof, CPS might actually believe him over you, especially if the kids are supporting his version of events." The thought made me want to throw up, but she was right. By the time I picked the kids up from school that afternoon, I'd ordered every surveillance device I could find on Amazon Prime. Nanny cams disguised as phone chargers, smoke detectors, and alarm clocks. Voice-activated recorders small enough to hide anywhere. I felt sick doing it. Turning my own home into a surveillance operation. But Derek had already turned my home into a battlefield. I was just finally realizing we were at war. While Emma and Liam did their homework at the kitchen table, I researched narcissistic manipulation and predatory behavior. Everything I read described Derek's actions with chilling accuracy. He'd isolated us from forming other close friendships in the neighborhood by monopolizing our time. He'd systematically undermined my authority while positioning himself as the ideal parent figure. He'd created dependencies and routines with the children that I wasn't even fully aware of. And now he was moving toward the final, most dangerous stage, creating evidence of neglect that would justify removing my children from my care. That evening, I tried to casually bring up Derek with the kids. "You guys really like spending time with him, huh?" I asked while we made dinner together. Both nodded enthusiastically, their faces lighting up in a way that hurt to see. "What kind of things do you talk about when I'm not around?" Emma immediately looked uncomfortable, sharing a glance with Liam. "Just stuff," she said vaguely. "What kind of stuff?" I pressed gently. She shrugged, suddenly very interested in the vegetables she was chopping. "Secret stuff. Derek says some things are just between us and him." My parenting alarms were screaming, but I kept my expression neutral and my voice calm. "You know you can always tell me anything, right? Even if someone says it's a secret. There are no secrets in our family that you can't share with me." Liam glanced at his sister, then said quietly, "Derek says you wouldn't understand. He says you might get mad and keep us from seeing him." The manipulation was so clear, so obvious now that I knew what to look for. Derek had been coaching my children to keep secrets from me, creating a separate relationship that excluded their mother. Classic grooming behavior. I changed the subject before my emotions showed on my face. The nanny cams arrived that night while the kids were getting ready for bed. I worked quickly, hiding them throughout the house. One disguised as a phone charger in the living room where Derek usually sat. Another as a clock in the kitchen. A third tucked into a bookshelf facing the hallway. I downloaded the app on my phone to monitor the feeds in real time. My hands were shaking as I set everything up, but I felt a small sense of control returning. Derek thought he was the only one with a plan. He was about to find out how wrong he was. I texted him that night, keeping my message casual and friendly. "Kids are asking when they can see you again. I have a work emergency tomorrow evening around 7. Any chance you could watch them for a couple hours?" His response came within seconds. "Busy until later, but could do 8 to 10, if that works." Perfect. That gave me time to test the cameras, make sure everything was recording properly, and prepare for what I needed to do next. Because I wasn't going to confront Derek directly. That would be too dangerous, especially now that I knew how manipulative he was. No, I needed to trick him into revealing his true intentions on camera, to catch him in his own trap. As I checked on Emma and Liam sleeping that night, I felt a surge of protective determination looking at their peaceful faces. Derek had tried to take what mattered most to me in the world. He'd wormed his way into our lives, won their trust and love, all while plotting to destroy our family. But he'd made one critical mistake. He'd underestimated a mother's instinct to protect her children. And now that I knew what he was planning, I would do whatever it took to stop him. I gently brushed Emma's hair from her forehead and whispered into the dark room, "Nobody is taking you from me. Not ever." Tomorrow, Derek would get the surprise of his lifetime, and I would get the evidence I needed to stop him once and for all. The next morning, I kept everything normal, made pancakes shaped like hearts, asked about their upcoming school projects, pretended that everything was fine even though my insides felt like they were being torn apart. I casually mentioned that maybe we could drive to Phoenix next weekend to visit Grandma. The reaction was immediate and intense. Both kids started protesting at once, their voices overlapping in panic. "We can't go next weekend," Emma wailed, her eyes wide with distress. Liam looked genuinely frightened. "But Derek said he has a special surprise for us on Saturday. We promised we'd be here." I froze with the spatula midair, trying to keep my expression neutral even though my heart was racing. "What kind of surprise?" They both shook their heads, suddenly closing ranks. "It's a secret," Emma said firmly. "We can't tell you. Derek made us promise." The fact that Derek was already planning something specific for the following weekend made my timeline feel even more urgent. Whatever he was building toward, it was happening soon. "Well, we don't have to decide about Phoenix right now," I said, lightly, turning back to the stove. Let's just see how the week goes. While the kids were at school, I went through their rooms. I hated invading their privacy like this, but I needed to know what I was dealing with. Under Emma's mattress, I found a cheap prepaid phone. My hands started shaking as I turned it on. There was only one number programmed into it. Derek's. The text message history made me feel sick. Messages telling Emma to call him if mommy acts weird. Instructions to contact him immediately if I tried to take them anywhere far away. Coaching on what to say and not say to me. I found an identical phone hidden inside Liam's favorite stuffed dinosaur. 7 years old, and he'd been given a secret phone to contact a grown man without his mother's knowledge. I took pictures of everything, documenting the phones, the messages, all of it. But I left them exactly where I found them. I couldn't let Derek know that I'd discovered them. Not yet. I called the school next and asked to speak with both kids' teachers. Emma's teacher, Mrs. Patterson, mentioned that Emma had been talking about Uncle Derek constantly over the past few months. She seems very attached to him, Mrs. Patterson said carefully. Is he family? No, just a neighbor, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Liam's teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, had more concerning news. Liam had become more withdrawn lately, less engaged with other kids. He seems anxious a lot of the time, Mr. Rodriguez said, and he's mentioned being worried about his mom several times. Is everything okay at home? The question hit me like a punch to the gut. Derek's manipulation had been so thorough that even Liam's teacher had noticed changes in his behavior. Then came the real bombshell. Oh, and I should mention, Mrs. Patterson added, Derek picked Emma up early from school twice last month. Both times he had a note that looked like it was from you, saying there was a family emergency. I verified with the front office, and his name was on the approved pickup list, so we released her to his care. My vision tunneled. Derek had been picking my children up from school without my knowledge or permission, and somehow he'd gotten himself onto their authorized pickup list. I need to update the pickup authorization immediately, I told Mrs. Patterson, my voice tight with barely controlled panic. Derek is not authorized to take my children under any circumstances. I am the only person approved for pickup until further notice. After hanging up, I sat in my car in the school parking lot, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Derek wasn't just manipulating my kids at home. He'd been inserting himself into every aspect of their lives. School pickup, secret phones, planned weekend activities I knew nothing about. He was systematically replacing me, building a case that he was more involved, more stable, more essential to their well-being than their own mother. That evening, when the kids came home, I tried again to ask about their relationship with Derek, approaching it from a different angle. I was thinking it might be fun if we invited some other neighbors over for a barbecue this weekend, I suggested. Maybe the Johnsons from across the street? Their daughter is in your class, Emma. Emma's response was immediate and defensive. Why? Don't you want Derek to come? Are you trying to replace him? Liam's lower lip trembled. If you make Derek go away, I'll hate you forever. Mommy. Forever and ever. The words felt like knives, but I forced myself to stay calm. I'm not trying to make anyone go away, honey. I just thought it would be nice to meet some other neighbors, too. But both kids had already shut down, convinced I was plotting against Derek. I changed tactics, suggesting we bake cookies together. While we mixed the dough, Emma mentioned that Derek had been teaching them special games. What kind of games? I asked, trying to sound casual even though my heart was pounding. She immediately clammed up, exchanging a significant look with Liam. Secret games, Liam said firmly, his little face set in stubborn lines. Derek says they're just for us, not for mommies. I kept my expression neutral despite the nausea rising in my throat. What exactly were these secret games? What was Derek doing with my children when I wasn't there? Later that evening, after the kids were in bed, I called my friend Monica, who worked in social services. Without naming names, I explained the situation, describing what I'd overheard and the changes in my children's behavior. Without solid evidence, it's going to be your word against his, Monica warned. And if the kids are already alienated from you to this degree, their statements in an investigation might actually support his claims instead of yours. The thought made me feel physically ill, but I knew she was right. So what do? I asked desperately. You need him to reveal his true intentions on record, she said carefully. Video or audio of him admitting what he's planning. And you need to document everything about your positive interactions with the kids. Their meals, their schedules, every instance of good parenting. Build a paper trail that counters any claims of neglect before he has a chance to create false evidence. That night, I started keeping a detailed log. Photos of the healthy meals I prepared, screenshots of the kids' academic progress, pictures of us doing activities together, every bedtime story, every homework session, every hug and kiss and moment of normal family life. Building my own case to prove I was a good mother, even though the idea that I might need to prove such a thing made me want to scream. When Derek arrived at 8 o'clock the next evening, I was ready. Every camera was recording, voice-activated devices were hidden throughout the house, and I'd rehearsed my performance a dozen times. I needed to appear distracted and stressed, giving Derek exactly what he wanted to see. Evidence of an overwhelmed, struggling mother. I opened the door looking frazzled, my hair pulled into a messy bun, wearing yoga pants with a visible stain from the spaghetti sauce I deliberately spilled on myself. Thank God you're here, I said, injecting just the right amount of desperation into my voice. Work has been insane today. I'm completely underwater. Derek's eyes immediately sharpened, taking in my appearance, scanning the living room behind me for signs of disorder. I'd strategically left some toys scattered around, a few dishes in the sink, creating the illusion of a household falling apart. The kids look a bit tired, he said with carefully crafted concern, his voice loud enough for Emma and Liam to hear from where they were watching TV. Have they had dinner yet? They had snacks, I mumbled, running a hand through my hair. I was going to order pizza. Derek clicked his tongue disapprovingly, the sound calculated to signal his displeasure to the children. Growing kids need proper nutrition, not junk food. This is exactly what I've been worried about, Jessica. I bit back the angry retort that wanted to explode from my lips. Instead, I just nodded tiredly, playing into exactly the image he wanted to see. A mother failing at the basics. I mentioned casually, as if it had just occurred to me. By the way, I've been thinking about moving us closer to my parents. My mom offered to help with childcare while I take on more hours at work. Derek's face darkened momentarily before he recovered his friendly mask. The flash of rage was brief, but unmistakable, and I prayed the hidden camera had captured it. Moving, he said, his voice tight. That would be incredibly disruptive for the children. They're just settling in here, making friends, establishing routines. It would make things easier financially, I pressed, watching him carefully. My mom is retired and available. It seems like the practical choice. Derek steered me toward the kitchen, his hand on my elbow in a gesture that looked supportive but felt controlling. Once we were out of the kids' earshot, his mask slipped completely. "What the hell are you doing?" he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "You're ruining everything." Got him, I thought, knowing the kitchen recorder was capturing every word. I kept my face, fearful and confused. "I don't understand why you're so upset. It's just an idea my mom suggested. Because these kids need stability," he said, composing himself quickly, but not quickly enough. "And I'm here to help provide that. Your parents live 3 hours away. Emma and Liam would have to change schools, lose all their friends here, lose me." The way he said, "lose me," with such proprietary certainty, sent ice through my veins. These were my children, but he spoke about them as if they already belonged to him. "I didn't realize you were so invested in our lives," I said carefully, my voice deliberately meek. His eyes narrowed, assessing whether I was being sincere or challenging him. "Of course I'm invested. Those kids mean everything to me. Not your kids. Those kids. Like they were objects rather than human beings. Like their relationship to me was already being erased in his mind." I decided to push him further, to see if I could get an even more explicit admission. It's just that Emma and Liam are my children, and I need to make the best decisions for them, I said gently. Derek's jaw twitched, a micro-expression of rage before he smoothed it away. Of course they're your children, technically. That word, technically. Like my motherhood was a legal technicality rather than a biological reality. Like he was already planning to make it no longer true. I glanced at the clock. I should really get going. This work emergency is pretty urgent. Derek walked back to the living room where the kids were waiting. He hugged them each extra long, whispering something I couldn't hear into Emma's ear. That made her nod solemnly. After he left, I immediately pulled up the recordings on my phone. The kitchen audio was clear, capturing his "you're ruining everything" comment and his possessive language about the kids, but I knew it wasn't enough. These statements, damning as they were, could potentially be explained away by a skilled lawyer as the concern of a well-meaning friend. I needed more concrete evidence of his plan to frame me for neglect and take my children through CPS. The next morning, I casually mentioned finding the secret phones while cleaning their rooms. Both Emma and Liam immediately looked panicked, their eyes wide with fear. "Where did you get those?" I asked, keeping my tone curious rather than accusatory. They claimed to have found them, a lie so obviously rehearsed that it hurt to hear them deliver it with such forced conviction. Derek had coached them on exactly what to say if I discovered the phones. Even when caught red-handed, they stuck to his script. I tried a different approach that afternoon. "Remember when we lived in Phoenix?" I asked, pulling out photo albums from before Derek came into our lives. "Look at this picture from the zoo. Remember how Liam threw up after eating too much cotton candy?" I laughed, trying to remind them of our life before Derek had inserted himself into it. Emma frowned at the pictures, her face troubled. "Derek showed us different pictures of you," she said quietly. "What pictures?" I asked, my heart rate accelerating. "Pictures where you looked mean and angry," Liam added. "He said you were always like that, but we were too little to remember." My blood ran cold. "Can you show me these pictures?" Both kids shook their heads. "Derek keeps them at his house. He said we shouldn't ask you about them because you'd just lie about it." Derek had been showing my children manipulated or selectively chosen photos of me, creating false memories and distorted perceptions of who I was as a mother. This was psychological warfare at its most sophisticated, and he was waging it against children. I called Claire again, and she agreed to fly out from Phoenix to stay with us for a few days. Having another adult witness Derek's behavior firsthand felt essential, and I desperately needed backup as I gathered more evidence. She arrived 2 days later, and the kids were excited to see their Ardor Enchi Arsmai. Dairsmeinchi. Claire. We were making dinner together, laughing and cooking, when Derek showed up unannounced. He didn't knock or ring the doorbell. He just walked right in through the front door, carrying gift bags like he owned the place. "Surprise visit," he announced cheerfully, completely ignoring how inappropriate it was to enter someone else's home uninvited. Emma and Liam ran to him like he was a rock star, their faces lit up with pure joy. He handed them each a wrapped package, large and clearly expensive. "Not right now," I said firmly, trying to assert some parental authority. "We're about to sit down for dinner." Derek smiled at me, but his eyes were cold. "Oh, let them open them. It's just something small to brighten their day." Before I could respond, the kids had already torn into the packages, revealing expensive electronics, tablets with cases and headphones. Derek had just given my children $100 gifts without asking my permission, in front of my sister, deliberately undermining my authority, or in your own home. "That's very generous, but we have a rule about expensive gifts," I said, maintaining my composure even though I wanted to scream. Derek waved his hand dismissively. "Rules are made to be broken sometimes, right, kids?" Emma and Liam nodded enthusiastically, already absorbed in their new tablets, completely ignoring my instructions about dinner. After the kids finally went to bed, Claire was visibly shaken. "Holy shit, Jess. You weren't exaggerating even a little. The way he just walked in like he owned the place. The way he undermined you right in front of me with those gifts. That was one of the most unsettling things I've ever witnessed." Claire and I developed a new strategy. She would pretend to be concerned about my parenting, sympathetic to Derek's perspective. She'd try to gain his trust and get him to open up more freely about his intentions. The next day, Claire accidentally ran into Derek at the neighborhood coffee shop. She struck up a conversation, mentioning she was in town visiting and expressing concern about how stressed I seemed lately. Derek was initially suspicious, studying Claire's face carefully, but she was convincing in her performance as the worried sister. "How are the kids doing?" he asked, and Claire noticed how his entire focus immediately zeroed in on Emma and Liam, rather than asking about me. "Honestly, I'm a bit worried," Claire improvised. "Jessica seems so overwhelmed lately. The house is messier than usual. She seems emotional. I'm concerned about how it's affecting the kids." This seemed to reassure Derek that Claire was an ally. He started opening up, complaining about my parenting in ways that sounded concerned on the surface, but were deeply manipulative underneath. Claire suggested the three of us get drinks that weekend to discuss the situation, positioning it as a concerned intervention. When Derek texted me to confirm the meeting, his message had an edge of suspicion, so I had to play it carefully. I responded that I wasn't sure it was a good idea, that I was busy, making him work for my agreement. Playing hard to get seemed to reassure him that this wasn't a trap. That Saturday, we met at a bar downtown. I arrived 15 minutes late, looking flustered and disorganized on purpose. Derek immediately started listing concerns about my mental stability to Claire, painting a picture of a mother barely holding it together. Claire skillfully steered the conversation toward his techniques with the kids. "You seem to have such a natural connection with them. How did you develop that bond so quickly?" Derek puffed up with pride, the expert being asked to share his secrets. After a few drinks, his guard lowered even further. "Children need structure and consistency," he explained, leaning in like he was sharing professional wisdom. "When their primary caregiver is unstable, they naturally look for security elsewhere. I simply positioned myself as that security." Claire nodded sympathetically. "That's so insightful. How exactly did you do that?" Derek smiled, clearly pleased to have an audience for his manipulative brilliance. "It's about creating contrast. If Mom says no to something reasonable, I say yes. If she's tired and short-tempered, I'm endlessly patient. If she sets rules, I show them that rules don't matter. Eventually, the children start coming to me first for everything. They begin to see me as the reliable one and their mother as the obstacle." I gripped my glass so hard I thought it might shatter, but I kept my face neutral and my expression defeated. He was openly admitting to systematically turning my children against me, and he was proud of it. Claire was recording parts of the conversation on her phone under the table, but the bar was too noisy for clean audio. We needed a better environment. "This is such an important conversation," Claire suggested. "Maybe we should continue this over dinner next week at Jessica's house? Somewhere quieter where we can really talk." Derek readily agreed, clearly believing he'd found an ally in Claire. As we left the bar, he placed his hand on my lower back in a possessive gesture that made my skin crawl, like I was already his property, like he'd already won. The following week was tense as I prepared for the dinner. That would hopefully give us the clear evidence we needed. I set up additional recording devices, tested them multiple times, made sure every angle of the house was covered. While I was hiding a recorder behind some books in the living room, Liam walked in unexpectedly. "What's that, Mommy?" he asked, pointing to the small device in my hand. My heart raced. "It's a special timer for cooking," I lied, hating that I was now the one being dishonest. "I'm trying some new recipes this week." He seemed to accept this explanation, but I was more careful hiding the rest of the devices. If Derek found out what I was doing before I could get him on record, everything would fall apart. The night of the dinner arrived. Derek showed up with an expensive bottle of wine, suggesting we all loosen up with a drink. I noticed him watching me closely as I sipped mine, so I secretly poured most of it into a nearby plant when he wasn't looking. Something about his insistence that I drink made me suspicious. Was he trying to impair my judgment? Get me intoxicated so I'd seem unstable? Claire skillfully brought up the topic of my parenting struggles again, and Derek became more candid as the evening progressed. The children confide in me, he said, his voice dripping with false concern. They tell me things they're afraid to tell their mother. Things that worry me deeply about their safety and well-being. That's when Emma suddenly burst into tears in the living room where she'd been coloring. "I don't want to go away from Derek," she wailed, her little face crumpled with genuine distress. I froze, my heart breaking. "What do you mean, sweetie? No one's going away." Emma looked at Derek, then back at me, her eyes red and swollen. "But if you keep being mean to Derek, he can't take us to his special place. He promised us we could go, but only if you're nice to him." The special place. What special place? Terror flooded through me. "What special place, Emma?" Derek quickly intervened, his voice smooth. "I mentioned taking them to the Children's Science Museum sometime. That's all. She's just confused." But Emma's outburst had revealed something critical. Derek had been having private conversations with my children about taking them somewhere, and he'd made it conditional on my behavior. This was grooming language, preparation for separation. Claire, who had been recording this exchange while pretending to check messages on her phone, caught this perfect example of manipulation on video. After the kids went to bed, we reviewed the footage. Derek had revealed enough concerning behavior to raise red flags, but nothing explicitly illegal. Nothing that couldn't be explained away by a talented lawyer as a misunderstanding. We needed more. I decided to force his hand. The next morning, I texted Derek. "After last night, I'm considering therapy for the kids. They seem confused about boundaries and relationships. I think they need professional help to process some things." His response came immediately, and the panic in his words was barely concealed. "I'd be happy to help you find a good therapist. I know several who specialize in children." But I had already anticipated this move. "Thanks, but I've already selected one and scheduled appointments for next week. A specialist in family dynamics and parental relationships." The phone rang within minutes. Derek's voice was tight with barely controlled anxiety. "Don't you think you should have consulted me before making such a big decision? Therapy can be disruptive for kids. It might make them feel like something's wrong with them. I'm their mother, Derek. I don't need to consult you about their health care." There was a long silence. When he spoke again, his voice was cold. "I'm concerned about your erratic behavior lately. Pulling them out of school early for no reason, making sudden appointments, cutting them off from people who care about them. If this continues, I might need to report my concerns to the appropriate authorities." There it was, the threat I'd been waiting for. I kept my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Are you threatening to call CPS on me because I'm taking my children to therapy?" "I'm just concerned about their well-being," he said smoothly, already backtracking, as any responsible adult would be. I recorded this entire conversation, finally capturing his controlling behavior and veiled threats on tape. When I played it for Claire, she agreed we were making progress, but noted that Derek was still being careful with his explicit words. "We need to make him believe you're actually leaving," Claire suggested, "that you're taking the kids away permanently. That should trigger a bigger, more revealing reaction." The next day we implemented our plan. Claire helped me pack several boxes and place them visibly in the front yard. We labeled them obviously: kitchen, Emma's toys, Liam's books. Things that would signal a permanent move rather than just spring cleaning. I knew Derek drove by our house multiple times a day, checking on us. Sure enough, within an hour of placing the boxes outside, he pulled up. He pretended to be casually passing by, but I could see the panic in his eyes as he approached. "Spring cleaning?" he asked, gesturing to the boxes, but his voice was strained. "Actually, I found a great job opportunity in Denver," I improvised. "Better pay, better schools for the kids, better everything, really. I think a fresh start is exactly what we need." Derek's mask didn't just slip, it shattered completely. His face contorted with rage, and he stepped closer to me, invading my space in a way that felt threatening. "You can't just take them away," he hissed, all pretense of friendliness gone. "Those children need stability. They need me. I've spent months building their trust, creating routines. You can't just erase all of that." "They're my children, Derek," I replied calmly, even though inside I was terrified by the raw anger in his eyes. "For now," he said, his voice eerily controlled despite his obvious fury. "But trust me, if you try to leave, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of mother you really are. I have documentation. Evidence that doesn't just disappear. By the time I'm done, CPS will be begging to take those kids away from you." Before I could respond, our neighbor Mrs. Kim walked by with her dog, and Derek immediately transformed back into his charming persona, commenting on the beautiful Seattle weather. But as he left, he gave me a parting shot that chilled me to the bone. "We'll talk later, Jessica. Very soon." That night, after putting the kids to bed, I was in the kitchen when I noticed a shadow outside the window. I carefully peeked through the blinds and saw Derek standing in our backyard, trying to look through the windows, his face barely visible in the darkness. My hand started shaking so badly I could barely pull my phone from my pocket. I turned on the back porch light and opened the door, forcing strength into my voice. "What are you doing?" I demanded. He seemed startled, but quickly recovered. "I was just checking on the children's welfare. You seemed upset earlier. I wanted to make sure everyone was safe. It's 10:30 at night. Get off my property right now or I'm calling the police." He held up his hands in mock surrender and backed away, but his eyes were cold and calculating. "Just being a concerned neighbor, Jessica. That's all I've ever been." The encounter convinced me we couldn't wait any longer. Derek was escalating, becoming more desperate, and therefore more dangerous. The next morning, I drove Emma and Liam to my parents' house in Phoenix. About an hour into the drive, I noticed a dark blue sedan following us at a consistent distance. I took several random turns, and the car continued to follow every single one. It was Derek. I called Claire in a panic. "He's following us. He's literally following us to my parents' house." Claire's voice was calm but urgent. "Take unexpected routes. Go to a police station if you need to. Do not let him know where your parents live." I made a sudden turn into a shopping center and drove in circles through the parking garage. When I emerged on the other side, the blue sedan was gone. I took a convoluted route the rest of the way, constantly checking my rearview mirror, my heart not settling until we'd safely arrived at my parents' house. After explaining enough of the situation to put my parents on high alert, I handed Emma and Liam over to their care and headed back to Seattle with Claire. But when we arrived at my house, something was immediately wrong. The front door was slightly open. We cautiously entered to find the house had been searched. Drawers were pulled out, papers scattered across tables and floors. Someone had been looking for something, the nanny cams. Derek had broken into my home looking for the recording devices, trying to eliminate evidence of his manipulation. We immediately called the police. Officer Garcia arrived quickly and documented the break-in thoroughly, taking photos and fingerprints. "There are no signs of forced entry," she noted. "Whoever did this had a key. Derek must have made a copy at some point during the 6 months he'd been babysitting, letting himself into my home whenever he wanted. Without more evidence connecting a specific person to the break-in, we can only charge for trespassing if we can prove who it was," Officer Garcia explained. "The missing items, these recording devices you mentioned, do you have any proof they existed or what was on them?" Claire came up with a new approach after Officer Garcia left. "Let's use this break-in to our advantage. I'll call Derek, pretending to be panicked about the police involvement, see if we can get him to reveal his hand." She put the call on speaker so I could hear. "Derek, someone broke into Jessica's house," Claire said, her voice perfectly mimicking panic and distress. "The police were just here. I'm completely freaking out." Derek's response was chillingly calm, almost pleased. "This is actually perfect," he said smoothly. "What do you mean it's perfect?" Claire pressed. "Think about it. An unstable mother leaves her house unsecured, goes on impulsive out-of-town trips with her children. This all builds a case. Pattern of erratic, dangerous behavior. Claire caught my eye, both of us realizing what he meant. The break-in wasn't just about finding the cameras. It was part of his plan to make me look negligent and unfit. What case? Claire asked carefully. Let's just say your sister might not be the most suitable guardian for those children, Derek replied. Sometimes kids need to be removed from unsafe situations for their own good, and when that happens, they need to be placed with someone stable, someone who already has a relationship with them, someone like me. After hanging up, we had our smoking gun, Derek explicitly stating his intention to have my children removed from my care and placed with him. But we needed him on video saying these things, not just to Claire in a phone call that could potentially be claimed as taken out of context. Claire had an idea. We'll set up one final confrontation. Tell him you want to meet to discuss the kids' welfare. I'll be there, but so will Monica from Social Services and Officer Garcia. They'll be waiting in another room, listening to everything. That evening, I called Derek. Claire thinks you might be right about some things. I want to talk, just the three of us, about what's best for Emma and Liam. He agreed immediately, probably thinking he'd finally broken through to me, finally convinced me that I was the problem. What he didn't know was that we'd invited Officer Garcia and Monica to wait in my spare bedroom, listening through the wall and recording everything. They arrived early, positioning themselves quietly while Claire and I sat in the living room, waiting. Derek arrived looking confident, almost triumphant. When he saw it was just Claire and me, he visibly relaxed. So, he said, settling onto my couch like he owned it, you wanted to talk about the children's welfare? I looked him straight in the eye and decided to play my trumps card. Yes, I'm concerned about someone who's been manipulating my children, breaking into my home, and plotting to have them taken away from me. Derek's smile faltered. I don't know what you're talking about, Jessica. That's paranoid thinking. Is it? I asked, and then I switched to Korean. Meot daldeo isumya negocieo. Just a few more months and they'll be mine. Quoting his exact words from that phone call 6 months ago. The color drained from Derek's face. You don't speak Korean, he stammered, but we both knew it was over. I studied abroad in Seoul for 2 years, I replied in English. Surprise. I pulled out my phone and played the recording of him threatening to build a case against me. Then the kitchen recording where he'd slipped up, saying I was ruining everything. As the evidence mounted, Derek's charming facade crumbled completely. He stood up abruptly, and hands clenched into fists. This proves nothing. No one will believe you over me. Those kids love me more than they love you. I'm the one they run to. I'm the one they trust. You're just the biological parent. I'm the one who's actually there for them. Manarun Sunfalmarin. That's when Officer Garcia and Monica emerged from the bedroom, having heard everything. Actually, Officer Garcia said calmly, she does have proof, extensive proof, and you just provided even more of it. Derek tried to leave, but found his path blocked by Officer Garcia. This is ridiculous. I was just trying to help those children escape a chaotic home environment. By breaking into that home, Officer Garcia asked, by giving 7- and 10-year-old children secret cell phones to contact you? By planning to make false reports to child services? As Officer Garcia arrested Derek for stalking, breaking and entering, attempted custodial interference, and child endangerment, he looked at me with pure hatred. The mask was completely gone now. Those kids will never forgive you for this. They love me. They'll always love me more than they could ever love you. I watched as they took him away, feeling relieved but also devastated, because the hardest part was still ahead of me. Helping Emma and Liam understand what had happened and rebuilding the trust that Derek had systematically destroyed. When I called my parents to tell them it was safe to bring the kids home, my mother reported that both Emma and Liam had been asking for Derek constantly. They seem to genuinely believe you're keeping them from him deliberately, she said worriedly. They're angry at you, Jessica. I don't know how else to put it. The drive to Phoenix to pick them up felt like going to face an execution. How do you explain to a 7 and 10-year-old that the adult they trusted had been manipulating them? How do you help children understand concepts like gaslighting and predatory behavior when you can barely process it yourself? When I arrived at my parents' house, neither child would even look at me. Emma stayed in her room, and when I tried to talk to her, she screamed that I was lying about Derek, that I was jealous because they loved him more. Liam cried and said he hated me for taking Derek away. Their words cut deeper than any physical wound could have. The drive back to Seattle was silent, except for Emma's occasional crying and Liam's whispered conversations with his sister about how unfair this all was. I contacted a child psychologist who specialized in cases of emotional manipulation and predatory grooming. Dr. Chen explained gently that children this age don't have the capacity to understand manipulative tactics. Right now, Emma and Liam simply feel like someone they loved has been taken away, and they're blaming you because you're the only target available to them. This wasn't their fault, but they can't see that yet. We need to be patient and focus on rebuilding trust slowly. The kids initially refused to talk to Dr. Chen. Emma sat with her arms crossed, refusing to answer questions. Liam would only communicate through his stuffed dinosaur, making it talk instead of speaking himself. But Dr. Chen was patient, using play, therapy, and art to slowly get them to open up. After their third session, Dr. Chen showed me a drawing Liam had made. It showed a figure giving candy and toys to 2 children, while a scary-looking person with angry eyes stood in the background. The scary person was labeled Mom. Derek used a technique called behavior modification, Dr. Chen explained gently. He rewarded the children with treats and positive attention whenever they reported negative things about you. And he withdrew affection, acted disappointed whenever they said anything positive about you. Essentially, he conditioned them to view you negatively and him positively. The road to recovery was excruciating. There were nights when Emma would scream that she hated me, that I was mean for taking Derek away. Liam became withdrawn, refusing to engage with me beyond necessary communication. Just when I thought we were making tiny steps of progress, I discovered Derek had found a way to maintain contact despite the restraining order. A letter arrived addressed to the children, sent through someone I didn't know. It was filled with subtle manipulation, telling them he missed them, that he was being unfairly kept away, that someday they'd understand the truth about who really loved them. I immediately contacted my lawyer and got a more comprehensive restraining order that prohibited all forms of contact, direct or indirect. But Derek was persistent. A few weeks later, Emma came home from school wearing a new bracelet. "Where did you get that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual, even though alarm bells were screaming in my head. "The new classroom helper gave it to me," she replied innocently. "She said it was a secret present from someone who loves me." I visited the school the next and discovered that one of Derek's relatives, a woman who'd volunteered as a classroom aide, had been the one to give Emma the bracelet. When confronted, she claimed ignorance about any restraining order. The principal agreed to remove her from Emma's classroom, but explained they couldn't ban her from the school entirely without more concrete evidence of malicious intent. Meanwhile, Derek's criminal case was moving through the legal system, though much more slowly than I'd hoped. His expensive lawyer kept filing motions for delays, painting Derek as a concerned friend who'd only been trying to protect children he was worried about. The prosecutor and I worked together, organizing our evidence and preparing for trial. We discovered that some of our recordings might be inadmissible due to consent laws, which was a significant setback. We had to focus on strengthening testimony about the break-in and the documented pattern of manipulation. As the court date approached, Derek's defense team requested that Emma and Liam be interviewed, claiming the children would support his version of events, that he was a caring family friend concerned about their welfare. I was horrified at the thought of them being involved in court proceedings, but we compromised on a private interview with a court-appointed child advocate. The advocate, Ms. Patel, was experienced and gentle with kids. The interview seemed to go well initially, Emma and Liam, relaxing slightly, as Ms. Patel asked them about school and their hobbies. Then she showed them a photo that included Derek. Liam suddenly became withdrawn, his little body going rigid. "I'm not supposed to tell the secret," he whispered, his eyes filling with tears. Ms. Patel recognized this as a sign of coaching and documented it carefully in her report to the court. Evidence that the children had been instructed to keep secrets, a classic red flag in manipulation and grooming cases. This proved to be a turning point. Derek's lawyer tried to paint me as paranoid and unstable, but the evidence of his systematic isolation tactics was overwhelming. The judge ordered a complete psychological evaluation of Derek. The results were revealing and terrifying. The evaluation showed concerning patterns of narcissistic personality disorder and obsessive behaviors related to children and family structures. Background checks revealed Derek had fabricated large portions of his backstory. He wasn't from a Korean family. He'd learned the language and affected the accent specifically as part of his persona. He'd also used at least 3 different names over the past decade. What we still couldn't understand was why. Why target my family specifically? What drove him to invest so much time and energy into this elaborate manipulation? Claire suggested doing deeper research into Derek's past, beyond what the police had already uncovered. Her investigation led to a disturbing discovery. Derek had attempted similar behavior with at least 2 other single mothers in different cities. In each case, Imurmla inserted himself into the Marua family's life, alienated the children from their mother, and then disappeared when his manipulation was discovered. But none of these women had filed official reports against him, probably too traumatized or scared or ashamed. We managed to contact one of these mothers, a woman named Rebecca, who agreed to meet with me. She was clearly terrified, constantly checking over her shoulder during our coffee shop meeting. We moved to my car for more privacy, and that's when she finally opened up. "He called himself Daniel when I knew him," she explained, her hands shaking as she showed me a photo on her phone. It was undeniably Derek, though with different hair and glasses. He almost succeeded in getting custody of my son. According to Rebecca, Daniel had manipulated her child so thoroughly that her son had started making false allegations of abuse against her. When Child Services investigated, Daniel had presented himself as a stable father figure, offering to take temporary custody while the allegations were examined. "I realized what was happening just in time," she said, her voice breaking. "I packed up and fled the state in the middle of the night. We've been living under the radar for 3 years, terrified he'd find us again. I changed our names, moved multiple times. My son still doesn't understand why we had to leave everything behind." Rebecca's testimony provided the pattern evidence we needed. Now we could show that Derek's behavior wasn't a one-time misunderstanding or the actions of a well-meaning friend who overstepped. This was a calculated predatory pattern that he'd executed multiple times across different desiderations. Prosecutor was thrilled with this information, though she cautioned that Derek's lawyer would try to discredit Rebecca as an unreliable witness without concrete documentation of her claims. I spent hours reviewing all our recordings, looking for any clue that might connect Derek to his previous identities or reveal more about his motivations. Then Claire had an idea. "Focus on his phone. That's the one constant across all his personas." The prosecutor subpoenaed Derek's phone records, revealing multiple burner phones, but one consistent number he'd kept across his various identities. That number regularly called a residential facility in another state. When investigators contacted the facility, they initially refused to provide information, citing patient confidentiality. We had to get a specific court order to access the records. What we discovered was the missing piece of the puzzle. Derek had been a patient at a psychiatric facility 7 years ago, hospitalized for delusional disorder, specifically related to parenthood and family. He'd believed he was the father of various children he encountered, constructing elaborate fantasies about being separated from them unjustly. He'd been released when he appeared to improve with treatment, but clearly his obsession with saving children from their mothers had a clinical basis. He genuinely believed, in his disordered thinking, that he was rescuing kids from unfit parents. With this evidence, the case against Derek became significantly stronger. His defense team pivoted, trying to claim mental health issues reduced his culpability. But the prosecutor emphasized the calculated, methodical nature of action. Ikris multiple amulais. Mental illness secundar excuse predatory behavior, she argued. Derek Chen knew what he was doing was wrong. He went to elaborate lengths to hide his true identity and intentions. He planned every step of his manipulation. These are not the actions of someone unable to control their behavior. These are the actions of a predator. As the legal case progressed through trial, I focused on helping Emma and Liam heal. It was slow, painful work. They still had nightmares and separation anxiety. Emma refused to sleep in her own room, insisting on sleeping with me every night, waking up multiple times, checking to make sure I was still there. Liam developed a stutter that appeared whenever he was stressed or anxious. Dr. Chen worked with us on creating new bedtime routines, establishing safety rituals that would help the kids feel secure. We created special worry boxes where they could put written concerns or drawings of their fears, symbolically containing them so they didn't have to carry them alone. One night, about 3 months into therapy, Emma surprised me with an insight that showed she was beginning to understand. "Mommy, Derek lied to us about a lot of things, didn't he?" she asked quietly while I was tucking her in. "Yes, sweetie, he did. Did he ever love us? Or was that a lie too?" Her question broke my heart. How do you tell a child that an adult's affection was entirely manipulative? "I think Derek has some problems that make it hard for him to love people in a healthy way," I said, carefully. What he felt wasn't real love. Real love doesn't involve lying or manipulating or trying to take someone away from their family. Liam's healing was more complicated. He became angry, having outbursts where he'd throw things or hit walls. Traditional talk therapy wasn't working well for him, so we found an art therapist who helped him express his confusion and betrayal through painting and sculpture. His early artwork was dark and violent, all slashing lines and torn paper. But gradually, as the months passed, colors began to appear. Softer shapes, images that suggested hope rather than just anger. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The courtroom was packed with supporters, family, and Derek's few remaining defenders, who believed he was genuinely a good man caught up in a misunderstanding. I testified first, walking through the entire timeline of manipulation. Seeing Derek sitting at the defense table watching me with those calculated eyes made my skin crawl. But I stuck to the facts, referring to evidence rather than just my emotions. Claire testified next, describing Derek's confessions about how he deliberately positioned himself as superior to me in the children's eyes. The prosecutor played recordings where Derek admitted to turning Emma and Liam against me. Rebecca's testimony about her similar experience was powerful. When she identified Derek as Daniel, the man who'd attempted the same manipulation with her family years earlier, I watched several jurors' expressions harden with understanding. The psychiatric evidence explained Derek's fixation, but didn't excuse his actions. The prosecution emphasized repeatedly the difference between having mental health issues and methodically executing a plan to steal someone's children. Derek Chen didn't act on impulse, the prosecutor argued in her closing statement. He researched his targets. He created false identities. He spent months building trust, while simultaneously destroying the mother-child bond. He gave children secret phones and coached them to lie. He broke into a home to hide evidence. These are not the actions of someone unable to control themselves. These are the actions of a predator who knew exactly what he was doing. When Derek took the stand in his own defense, his carefully constructed facade began crumbling under cross-examination. The prosecutor methodically walked through each step of his manipulation, from moving into our neighborhood specifically because there was a single mother with minority children, to giving the kids secret ways to contact him, to his plans to create false evidence of neglect. Why did you tell these children you wanted to be their father when you had no legal or biological relationship to them, Chartri? The prosecutor asked. Derek's composure finally broke. Because I deserve to be their father, he snapped, his face flushing with rage. I would be better for them than she ever was. She doesn't appreciate what she has. She's always stressed, always distracted. I could give them everything they need. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all counts. Derek was sentenced to 7 years for stalking, breaking and entering, custodial interference, attempted kidnapping, and child endangerment. As they led him away in handcuffs, he looked at me one last time. And for just a moment, the mask slipped again. Pure, concentrated hatred filled his eyes. But then it was over. He was gone, and we could finally begin to truly heal. The months after the trial were a mixture of relief and continued struggle. Emma and Liam still had setbacks, bad days when old fears resurfaced, moments when they'd ask why Derek did what he did, and I had to find age-appropriate ways to explain mental illness and predatory behavior to children who should never have had to learn about such things. But gradually, slowly, we rebuilt. I started a mother-daughter journal with Emma, where she could write down her true thoughts and feelings without having to say them out loud. Some of her entries broke my heart. Sometimes I still miss Derek even though he was a liar, she wrote one night. And I feel stupid for believing him. Does that make me a bad person? We worked through those feelings together, Dr. Chen helping us understand that loving someone who hurt you doesn't make you bad or stupid. It makes you human. Liam's anger slowly transformed into understanding as he got older and could process what had happened with more maturity. His art became less violent, more exploratory. He started drawing our family, images of the 3 of us together, safe and whole. About 6 months after the trial, I ran into a man named James at Emma's school fundraiser. He was a single dad with a daughter in her class, and we struck up a conversation while volunteering at the bake sale. When he asked if I'd like to get coffee sometime, my immediate reaction was panic. I'd met Derek through my kids. He'd used them to get close to me. How could I ever trust anyone near them again? I declined James's invitation initially, but we kept bumping into each other at school events. He was patient and never pushy, giving me space while remaining friendly. After 6 months of casual public conversations, I finally felt comfortable enough to arrange a play date at a public park with his daughter. I watched James like a hawk that first day, analyzing every interaction he had with Emma and Liam. He must have felt my scrutiny, but he never commented on it. He just played frisbee with the kids, made terrible dad jokes, and respected their boundaries completely. When Emma had a minor meltdown about losing a game, James handled it perfectly, gentle but not patronizing, allowing her to feel her feelings without trying to fix everything. Liam had a panic attack one afternoon when he saw James helping me carry groceries from the car. His breathing became rapid, his eyes wide with fear. "What if he tries to take us away like Derek?" he whispered, his small body shaking. Instead of dismissing his fear or telling him he was being silly, I sat down at his level and took his hands. "That's a really important question, Liam. Let's talk about it." We discussed the differences between Derek's behavior and James's, how Derek had appeared suddenly and inserted himself into our lives, while James was someone we'd met naturally through school, how Derek had immediately tried to undermine my authority, while James consistently supported my parenting choices. How Derek had encouraged secrets, while James always checked with me before making any plans with the kids. The fact that Liam could verbalize his fear rather than letting it consume him silently represented enormous progress. 2 years after Derek's arrest and conviction, I'd saved enough for a down payment on a house in a new neighborhood about 30 minutes away from the rental on Maple Street. During the moving process, Emma found a stuffed animal Derek had given her tucked in the back of her closet. She held it up uncertainly. Should I throw this away? Rather than deciding for her, we created a special ceremony. We laid out all the items associated with Derek, toys he'd given them, photos that included him, even the secret phones that had been returned as evidence after the trial. Emma and Liam decided individually which objects to leave behind and which, if any, to bring to our new beginning. They chose to discard everything except one small notebook where Derek had written some science facts that Liam found genuinely interesting. The facts are true even though Derek was lying, Liam explained with 7-year-old logic that was somehow perfect. So I want to keep the true parts. In our new home, both kids initially checked locks and the security system obsessively every night. I didn't discourage this behavior, understanding their need for control and safety. Gradually, over months, their hypervigilance faded. I knew we'd turned a real corner when Emma left her bedroom door open while sleeping for the first time in 2 years. James and his daughter Sophie became regular visitors at our new house. The kids accepted his presence without the suspicion they'd initially shown. When he taught Liam how to throw a proper curveball or listened patiently to Emma's elaborate stories about her friends at school, there was no ulterior motive, no manipulation, just simple kindness and genuine interest. Our journey isn't over. There are still difficult days when memories resurface unexpectedly. Emma sometimes gets quiet and way withdrawn on the anniversary of Derek's arrest. Liam occasionally asks questions about whether we can ever really know if someone is telling the truth. Heavy philosophical questions for a young child, asking them from a place of growing strength rather than fear. We've developed tools and trust to face these challenges together. We talk openly about what happened while focusing on moving forward. What Derek tried to destroy, our family bond, has become stronger through our shared healing. We have movie nights where we build pillow forts that take over the entire living room. We started a tradition of Saturday morning pancakes with increasingly ridiculous toppings, competing to see who can create the strangest but somehow still edible combination. Emma joined a drama club, and Liam plays soccer. Normal kid stuff that once seemed impossible during the darkest days of Derek's manipulation. I still have all the recordings and evidence locked in a fireproof safe. I hope we never need them again, but their presence is a reminder that I'll always protect my children, no matter what threats emerge. Yesterday, while tucking Emma in, she whispered something that made tears spring to my eyes. I'm glad Derek didn't win, Mommy. We're tougher than he thought. Me too, sweetheart, I replied, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. Liam called from his doorway, no longer needing to sleep in my room, still wanting that good night connection. We're a team, the strongest team. And that's what home really is, I've learned. Not just a place with walls and a roof, but the safety and love we create with each other. The trust we build through honesty and consistency. The bonds that can be tested, but not broken. It's something no manipulator, no matter how clever or persistent, could ever truly take away. Because Derek didn't understand the most fundamental truth about family. Love isn't about control or possession. It's about freedom and choice. And Emma and Liam chose me every single day, once they were finally free to choose without manipulation clouding their judgment. We won, not because Derek went to prison, though that helped. We won because we survived, we healed, and we came out the other side still together, still loving each other, still whole. That's the victory that matters. That's the ending Derek never saw coming. Because predators like him can't comprehend real love. They only understand control. And control was the one thing we refused to give him.